We live, we live. Let me make sure I got everything up here. Everything good to go. Y'all can hear me. I know it's late. And Toya would definitely be talking crazy if she would have just heard my phone going off by now. But I get that it's late. And most people ain't up paying attention to this, but it's the midterms. Midterm elections. They going down right now. And let me turn this ringer off. Midterm elections are it's happening. It's happening. Democracy is taking place. Things is going down. I am traveling. My birthday is coming up, so I'm gonna be doing some traveling. I will not be able to be a part of the show Thursday. So I wanted to take this opportunity to get my election thoughts out now. Because for the next week or so, I ain't gonna be able to do that. And plus, it's all happening right now. You're getting it real time. I got some very some thoughts that I feel like it has to be said because I mean I ain't gonna say nobody else is saying it, but if I don't say it, I'm gonna have an issue. So here tonight we are doing it live. The midterm election reactions. We got some crazy losses. Some I guess you could consider productive wins. I do prefer progressive candidates. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I'm not even gonna act like there isn't any bias involved, even though I'm a part of the criticism that both parties are counterproductive, but I'm not dumb. And I'm able to say that there's at least one party that is more productive than the other. Lesser of two evils is a viable, pragmatic political strategy. And so there are some productive things that is happening tonight, maybe some good news that we can go with. But I want to first go ahead and I gotta start the show the way that we start the show. I probably create a different intro, but until then,
in the city we gon' slide, bet I be there pronto. Me in the city we gon' slide, bet I be there pronto. Me my guys, we really live. Lord forgive me, pay my tithes. Please don't have me reach inside, and that's in the console. Keep the semi when I ride, lit off Henny when I drive. In the city we gon' slide, bet I be there pronto.
all right, now, y'all let me know. Make sure y'all can hear me and everything, and make sure everything's connected and all that. But all right, with that being said, I want to start tonight out by first paying respect to Stacey Abrams. We've been having a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation about Kanye West. We've been talking a lot about Kyrie Irving, and it's a lot of people feel like they just so revolutionary. That they doing this huge thing to stand out and speak out for black people. And I for a lot of time I've been saying straight up, like, yo, no, that's not what this is. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are just kind of celebrities on some very surface level shit, right? But what's now frustrating is that Stacey Abrams just lost her second run at a governorship. To be clear, Stacey Abrams, Democrat in Georgia, the first time she got robbed, straight up. The first time the current now reelected governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, was the Secretary of State, and he was able to manipulate a lot of the voting practices that allowed black people to vote in the first place, right? You use that to his advantage. Stacey Abrams lost that election. This election, you can't really, because of the impact of what he did the first time, it carried over, and there was reverberations into, again, accessibility and those types of things that play a role in the black people voting. And so Stacey Abrams lost again in this election. But the reason why I want to make sure she get her flowers, she's gonna get a lot, right? Most people ain't looking at this as like, Stacey Abrams was failed, or her, she's not who she is politically, because she's still who she is politically. But it's a few important things that need to be pointed out when it comes to her election. And the first is that Kanye West and Kyrie Irving, whoever else that's purporting any type of revolutionary or change or anything else like that, ain't got shit on Stacey Abrams. It ain't even close, right? Like, Stacey Abrams is a real reflection of what it looks like to challenge power. Stacey Abrams is a real reflection of what it looks like to say, all right, these are the people in control. I'm not only going to coalesce and get my people and advocate for my people to push back against the people in control, but I'm also going to put myself in a position where I challenge things politically and put myself in a position to be able to make some of those decisions, right? And I really don't think anybody expected her to win, but it's willing to have that fight. It's willing to put up that challenge, especially in a place like Georgia, because Stacey Abrams was key to flipping Georgia. I guess because we're looking at like Georgia blue, and we also gonna look at what's going on in Georgia because I think a lot of throughout this year I've been saying that it's a possibility that Georgia should be looked at as like a model for other black areas, but we're gonna get to that. But in terms of a lot of the conversation about who black people should be following, who black people should be getting around, as much as there's this conversation about Kanye and as much as there's this conversation about Kyrie, Stacey Abrams deserves y'all attention. She deserves y'all support. She deserves us as a black community to be like, as much as we putting all these other people on the pedestal, she should go on the pedestal as well. I know we look at politics as like this dirty game. It's not something that people support. It's not something that people is like, nah, it's gonna be the same thing anyway. But what the issue with the arguments about how politics is for being a reason why people shouldn't engage in politics is that the power happens regardless. It don't matter if we okay with the outcome. That outcome is only going to keep occurring. It will reoccur unless we do something about it, unless we put ourselves in positions to push back against those outcomes. Because if we're not fighting for these positions of power, it's people that actually are that don't have our best interests at heart. And when they don't have our best interests at heart, and they're the people that's making decisions about our lives, that has a real world impact. So as much as we look at what Stacey Abrams has done, and we can't see her own personal success in these runs for governorship, like we cannot sleep on the ways in which she's actually organized politics in Georgia, the way that she's made things possible for Raphael Warnock, the way that she's made things possible even for John Ossoff. Another thing I want to point out is this is one of the key reasons why what Killer Mike was saying about Stacey Abrams was so dangerous, but so slept on. When Killer Mike was making statements like Stacey Abrams need to go to the places that Brian Kemp is going, those things are all irrelevant. All irrelevant. The only thing we need to be talking to Brian Kemp about is what is he doing to reverse what he actually did to make it harder for black people to vote in the state of Georgia in the first place. I don't care what schools he's going to. The whole reason he was able to beat Stacey Abrams the first time is because he was able to orchestrate removing voting places, limiting polling places, limiting the ability for people to organize and go to places and vote. I mean, he was one of the people that was sued by the NAACP. So while you have somebody like Killer Mike, who again, for whatever reason, was supporting, he for whatever reason went from supporting Bernie Sanders to supporting Brian Kemp and Herschel Walker. It's like that is the danger in allowing these type of people to be positioned as our political leaders, as our especially our thought leaders in terms of politics. If you can flip flop, I mean, and Killer Mike offered no explanation. He didn't explain to niggas why that shit was a problem. He didn't break down why. He didn't. There was like we still sitting here like how the midterms are here. They here and they about to be over, and everybody's still trying to figure out how the hell Killer Mike went from supporting Bernie Sanders to Brian Kemp. No, that explanation still ain't happening. But he's advocating for people to vote, for people like Herschel Walker, for people like Brian Kemp, without making them deal, or specifically Brian Kemp deal and reckon with what he did in elections past. You can't trust these folks, because if that was anybody else, I said this on the podcast. If Killer Mike went from supporting a Republican to supporting a Democrat, everybody in the community would be like he got bought out. Somebody did cut the check for Killer Mike. That's the only reason he would jump from one extreme to the next. He had to be paid off. Why is that not the same thing here? Killer Mike should not be trusted in this instance. You can't make a song about how bad Ronald Reagan was and then support a Reaganite like Brian Kemp. Stop playing. The next thought I had after that was in terms of making sure we give Stacey Abrams her flowers. I was asking myself, like I said, it had kept coming up, but we wasn't really able to get to it and sit on it the way that I wanted to. But Well, I was literally trying to figure out, is Georgia the answer? Does Georgia have the answers? And if we look at the election as it is now, it's a good chance that because these are the governor election results. Let me go to the Senate race because now we're about to talk about Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock real quick. So this is probably gonna go to a runoff, but Raphael Warnock does have a slim lead, 49.2 to 48.7, with 1.9 million votes, and Herschel Walker at 48.7 with 1.8 million. So it's close. It's still 211,000 votes out there. So it could shift either way, but it does appear that Raphael Warnock is starting to pull ahead. But the way that the elections work in Georgia, if neither candidate gets over 50%, then it goes to a runoff, which is just an extra election. Which if Raphael Warnock is winning now, I don't see why he wouldn't have the advantage in the runoff. But this is the thing about Georgia and the possibility of looking at Black people organizing in Georgia as a model for the rest of the country. We really looking at the numbers. let's look at the. I want to go to the exit polls. Let me go to the exit polls. When you look at how it went down in Georgia, Black people overwhelmingly voted Democrat, 90%. Like which is something that's not a surprise at all. We do that. Black people vote Democrat. I mean, in the instance of the Georgia election, like Black people know we not fucking with Herschel Walker like that. We know that that's somebody uncle that need to sit his ass him down. And we listen. Herschel Walker is a college football legend. You would never take that away from him. He's not somebody I would want at like leading the country in a position of power, especially because of who supported him and put him in that position in the first place. Somebody being Donald Trump. But the issue is more so when it comes to these congressional elections, there's really an issue with our ability to have our influence reflected in more than just being overwhelmingly Democrat. That should mean something more. Like us being overwhelmingly Democrat should mean or overwhelmingly anything should have more of an impact of help pushing the election towards one way. And looking at Georgia, that's just not the case. It's just not the case. If you look here, again, looking at the exit polls, it's 62% white. That's 70%. Which, in as much as we get called shills and we've been brainwashed, white people vote Republican at a 70% clip, like specifically in Georgia, at a 70% clip. But making up 62% of the population, that then becomes a problem for us. So I think it's should we look at Georgia as a model for how we should organize politically? Yes, but we should definitely understand the limitations. Just because regardless of where we are, and who our vote overwhelmingly goes for, especially because we traditionally vote the same way, it's essentially like, all right, whoever loses the Black vote definitely not going. All right, if Democrats lose the Black vote, they not going to win the election. It's as simple as that. But as much as people try to push that narrative to where it's like, well, that's what we need to do. That's why we need to not vote for them so that they lose and they realize. But when they lose, what people are not understanding is that they're losing the people who definitely don't have our interest at heart. So even if you don't like Democrats, the Republicans that's going to take their spot, that's going to fill that vacuum, are not going to be anywhere near as productive or beneficial. It's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be a good thing. So we should definitely be inspired. If Warnock wins, because again, with Stacey Abrams losing, it's like, all right, we can only do so much in terms of how far our influence will go. Because actually, let's take a look at the exit polls. If we look at the governor race, I mean, yeah, because she lost, you know what I'm saying, by a pretty significant amount. But again, like look here we go. Black people overwhelmingly supported Stacey Abrams. Overwhelmingly supported Stacey Abrams, 90% to 9%. So again, and I also don't think even with that 90%, if you look at breaking that down by gender, again, this is not something where it needs to be black men. Then black voters, the 28% that make up black voters, 90% voted for Stacey Abrams. If there is a small section of black men that vote against our interests because they caught up in that in plantation patriarchy and they're attaching themselves to the culture war that Republicans claim to be a part of, then it's definitely in the minority. Because there was an article that we spoke about that talked about how like Stacey Abrams had a problem with black men. That can't be the case if she's getting 90% of the vote. So that all that type of division, that shit could go out the window. But with Stacey Abrams losing with the clear support of black people, the only thing that could really redeem Georgia in terms of where, like, it's because they was looked at as a conservative state, or excuse me, a state that was flipped, right? Went from red to blue. We know Stacey Abrams had a lot to do with that, but with her losing to a known cheater, Brian Kemp, the only way that they can kind of redeem themselves as being like a place that we should look at that can be beneficial is if Raphael Warnock beat Herschel Walker. If Herschel Walker, I'm actually uncomfortable that it's this close. I really am. It bothers me that this many people are okay with somebody like Herschel Walker actually being in control of government. And this is why I feel like, and this is a part of kind of what's going on in the news today, but elections in terms of who people feel qualified, get put in positions, this is white people's affirmative action. Y'all know how the claim against affirmative action is always that it's not about the merit. People just getting put in there with affirmative action. It's about everything else but the merit. It's about everything else whether or not they're good enough. And even though that's not what affirmative action is about, that's always the claim that's generally made with that, right? The issue, though, is that when you look at elections, these people have no problem electing somebody who is just flat out not qualified. Donald Trump was one thing, and we're going to talk about Trump candidates and how well they did. Donald Trump was one thing. But Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, these people literally had actual they won their primaries. These people was literally are up for seats. Well, Dr. Oz lost his election, Fetterman won in Pennsylvania, but these people are up for seats in the highest, you know what I'm saying, positions of power in this country, making decisions about people's lives. What has Herschel Walker done to deserve this? Elections are affirmative action for white people because that's when they're able to put unqualified people in positions of power because they're gonna do what they told. As much as we get slack for us voting for Democrats, Herschel Walker was only put in his position to be a United States senator because he will do what he's told. And not from the perspective of, oh, this greater cabal. No, he wasn't going to do anything but vote the way that they wanted him to vote. Somebody like Ted Cruz, who's been in office for way too fucking long, has done nothing before, no bills, right? Authored anything that's been voted or anything like that. All he do is just vote the way people want him to vote. Herschel Walker would have just been a shield. He would have been a puppet, even more so than the rest of them. He ain't had a mental capacity to. The man, the public bouts of violence with his families, and then let's not talk about. We can talk about the hypocrisy. Anybody that'll get up there and tell you can't have an abortion, but is on record to have multiple abortions, should not be able to make decisions about abortions. Period. Anybody who can get up there as a politician and say, I'm going to make a law so that you can't do something, but they have repeatedly and consistently done it, should not be in a position of power. Herschel Walker don't deserve that. This is why we as a people, we need to change how we look at voting. Black people, we don't need to be as elitist as we are when it comes to voting. You know, when people was like, "Oh, Oprah or Michelle Obama," and it's like, "What, Oprah? What?" Like, no, stop. We have to look at this shit completely different because what's happening is, and it's not as happening as much because again, Dr. Oz lost, which is that Dr. Oz being elected was going to be the referendum for me on whether or not we just need to just straight out start electing like black celebrities to positions of power because that's what they doing with their celebrities. But I still believe, even with Dr. Oz losing, that we need to stop moving away from this idea that, oh, well, our celebrities is just they don't have and they not in a position. As much as I feel like somebody like Kanye, I can care less what he think about Hebrew people or Jews or whatever else. Somebody like Oprah, though, for example, can be more beneficial in terms of having that, in terms of being that influence, in terms of being in that position, right? Because really, once Donald Trump got elected, it was no holds barred. All bets was off. Y'all see how close Herschel Walker is to actually beating Raphael Warnock, right? And again, let's compare the resumes of Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. Raphael Warnock is the pastor of the church that Dr. Martin Luther King was the pastor of. Has a long resume of resisting certain practices and policies in his community that were bad for black people in that community. Herschel Walker played football for Georgia. What are we doing here? What puts him in this position to be this close to winning that seat? And it's nothing but being able to help conservatives win the culture war. We keep trying to separate politics from culture. We can't do that. We have to find a way to actually make politics to matter to our culture. It can't be rock the vote. It can't be vote or die, Diddy. It can't be that, right? Somehow we got to find, but it also can't be Kanye and it can't be Kyrie. We need to find a healthy medium in terms of somebody that's political or culturally relevant, but also politically astute, politically aware, can like make actual decisions that's not caught up in either just being a Democratic shield, but also working for the interest and the benefit of black people. It's people that can do that. Because as much as we talk about, because even Malcolm X was like, black people are the only people who have like celebrities as our leaders. But if you look at Malcolm X time, those leaders actually attack are pop culture icons attach themselves to the thought leaders of the black community. Martin Luther King had a relationship with Harry Belafonte. Malcolm X had a relationship with Muhammad Ali, right? Muhammad Ali was informed, was taught, right, by Malcolm X. So it's like we don't need to create that sharp division. We just got to find a way to make it beneficial for us. Because while we operating from this elitist standpoint, what they're doing is they're positioning anybody who has a cultural influence in their community to be in a position of power if they will help them in the culture war. That's what we losing. That's what we losing. Where we at? What some other thoughts that I had? I guess we could talk about Fetterman and Oz. Let me go ahead. We can pull up them numbers. Because that they went on ahead and called Fetterman and Oz. Dr. Oz will not be. I'm telling you, a lot of this stuff, I don't believe in the government of the United States, but a lot of this shit is just like, I don't want to exist under a government where people like this is making decisions. Dr. Oz is a known grifter. Dr. Oz had to sit in front of Congress and find ways to explain why the products that he was pushing on his show don't do the shit that he said that they did. Why again was this man somebody that was seriously considered a candidate for this position? A known liar. What are we doing? Like, it's already difficult enough being up under like the decisions of a lot of old white men, because like the average age of the United States and the age of Congress is like a 40-year fucking difference. Like, we got the oldest Congress we've ever had with the oldest president we ever had, but the population's sitting around 30, like 37, 38. What are we doing? On top of that, So we got these old establishment, of course, somehow attached to racist people in control, and then attached to that is people on TV. Dr. Oz, the nigga that sell weight loss pills. What are we doing? The nigga that was a running back for Georgia. What are we doing? What are we doing now? Please don't get it twisted and think that I think that, because Democrats are weak as hell, right? They just so happen to be on the right side of history with a lot of shit. That's just, recently, that's just about it. We can't say they've been on the, Democrats being on the right side of history is something that's a more modern thing. And if we being 100% honest, Republicans make it extremely easy for Democrats just to be like, oh, this is all I got to do is say like racism is bad and stand on that. And that's, yeah, I can say that without no problem. Conservatives make it easy for them for shit like that to matter, because you ask a Republican the same thing and they were like, well, we have the right to association and we should, and all that. They talk around all the bullshit. So when we look at what happened with in Pennsylvania, and this is a gain for Democrats. So this does position them with one extra seat, so they currently in control of the Senate. But with Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, like again, Oz, like Walker, was only a viable candidate simply because Donald Trump said, "Hey, vote for this man." What probably hurt him, I don't think he was going to win this election anyway, but what definitely hurt him is when Oprah came out and said, "Nah, vote for Fetterman," and Oprah was the person who made Dr. Oz Dr. Oz. So a lot of the shit that a lot of the ways he was able to sell bullshit to the people is because of somebody like Oprah. But when she turned around and was like, "Nah, vote for Fetterman," that couldn't have helped. That couldn't have helped. But the type of influence that Donald Trump still has, this hurts though. This hurts because the person who convinced Donald Trump to support Oz is Hannity, Sean Hannity, a Fox News fame. So with Oz losing, Donald Trump don't like being attached to losers. And J.D. Vance in Ohio won his election. That's somebody Trump supported. Herschel Walker looked like he's on the losing. He's gonna be on the losing end of a runoff. And Dr. Oz just lost his. So that's 2 out of 3 of Trump's big name candidates that's not making. So that's gonna cause some rift between Sean Hannity. It got to cause some rift between Sean Hannity and Donald Trump. But ultimately, we shouldn't be sitting here saying that people like Mehmet Oz is a viable candidate for somebody to make decisions about people's lives when he ain't shown that that's what he good at. When he's already been exposed to be a liar, already been exposed to be a grifter, a scam artist. And this would be an old term. I don't know if y'all really care too much about that, but shit like this. But I appreciate it. My boy Tyler. I got a couple days though, but Dr. Oz is what you call a carpetbagger. He was somebody who moved to Pennsylvania just to, just to try to take that seat for political purposes. So it's no surprise that he ended up the way that he did. Plus, the man had so many missteps. Fetterman had a stroke during the election. The man had, during the campaign. Dr. Oz and his campaign, literally used that and talked shit about him having a stroke during the campaign. A doctor. These people are not fit. Do y'all hear me? They are not fit. Lester J said Herschel moved to LA for his chance too. Wasn't Herschel in Texas? See? Who knows where Herschel Walker was? Without, he was somewhere with some of them kids. Melodious Ramblin said Oz has been the ultimate con man for years. He literally sold snake oil. Definitely. Again, Dr. Oz had to sit in front of Congress and try to explain to them why he was pushing products saying it was doing one thing when he wouldn't do that. Because that's definitely illegal. So make it make sense. But this man is up for stop it. We got to be better. We definitely got to be better. We can move on to this is funny. Abbott Greg Abbott the great state of Texas won re-election. I was texting back and forth with my partner who lived down there. He actually lived in the area where the Bushes grew up, but Abbott down there in Texas got reelected, and I think it's safe to say Texas is the Florida of the West. Texas is the Florida of the West. Abbott and DeSantis are very similar in a lot of ways. You got Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, who Rubio just won his reelection bid. And so you got these similarities, and the baseline for how you understand politics in Florida and how you understand politics in Texas is culture. Are you pushing white culture? Period. Or will you protect white culture? Period. That's the only thing voters in those areas care about. They not worried. Listen, they not worried about the taxes. That's gonna go over their head anyway. As long as you got the right talking points with taxes, people in Florida and people in Texas, they don't let me not say people, but majority white voters. Majority white voters. They vote for the culture war. They vote for the culture war, regardless of whether or not they actually ride with the candidate, regardless of whether or not they think that's the best candidate. Like, for example, a lot of people vote. Remember, Donald Trump got more votes the second time than he did the first time. That means it was more people that was willing to ride with Donald Trump in order for him to maintain their position in the culture war. They can't lose to the Democrats. What I be explaining to people all the time is that this is what you call white on white violence, right? The Democrat versus Republican conversation is not one that's situated around or that's productive for Black people. Democrat versus Republican is the culture war, the culture civil war that's happening amongst white people. Don't let these people try to scare you and tell you that the civil war that's coming, and they stocking up their guns, and they're too busy stocking up their guns against each other. Yeah, do they fuck with hard R in words? No, they do not. No, they do not. They do not fuck with hard R in words. But at the same time, do you know what's worse than a hard N word in their eyes today? A liberal, a Democrat, a Biden supporter, a Clinton supporter. Those things are the same way that Trump supporter is a slur these days. The same way it's a slur these days. Conservatives are situated on winning the culture war. Like, the problem with liberals, I mean, and this goes with Black Democrats too. Even I don't fit Black people in a lot of these criticisms, because again, we vote lesser of two evils. We know a lot of this whole shit, but it's definitely like it who's better for Black people heavily swings one way. Better does not mean the best or great. It means better comparatively. Let's remember that. But from that standpoint, the problem with liberals is that they're caught up in trying to be right. They're caught up in trying to be exact. They're caught up in trying to have the moral high ground. Conservatives can care less. Conservatives can care less. And Beto O'Rourke is another one who keep taking a licking and keep on ticking. Lost to Ted Cruz. Now he just lost to Abbott pretty heavily too. So it's like, they trying, but ultimately in places like Texas and Florida, they're more about maintaining their cultural state of mind, their cultural way of life, than they are anything else. That's why this used to be true about Kansas, because it was this book, What's the Problem with Kansas, that talked about how that conservatives routinely vote against their own economic interests to maintain their cultural beliefs. And what we've always saw in Florida is that they was heavily on wild politics and not really tripping. And Texas was heavily that, but I think what's happened more recently is that as we transition from like the Bush era neocons to the Tea Party Trump supporter type Republican politics, Texas was like, we not to be beat. We're not to be beat. If Florida is taking off the way that it is, and stand, because again, remember when that shit happened where they was flying, they flew all their migrants to Martha's Vineyard. That was a concerted effort between Texas and Florida. So They're clearly two states that are situated on we are attempting to win the culture war. That's it. We can care less about everything else. Are we maintaining the way of life that we've established and that we want to keep? Good, bad, ugly, etc. Are we maintaining it? And with Abbott being reelected, I mean, and again, Marco Rubio being reelected. Cruz wasn't up for Ted Cruz wasn't up for reelection this year, but he was just recently reelected. Even after all the in the last election, even after all of the bullshit that he did with him leaving during the hurricane or during the blizzard and all of that, they didn't care. They reelected him because they knew if they got somebody that's gonna be against the gays, against the blacks, right, against everybody that's trying to against the ones that are gonna take our guns. As long as you stand against that stuff, that's really what is mainly important. Now to a bit of more productive news, I feel like. Hold on, let me check on because I'm also checking the LA election, the LA mayor election. What's his name? Newsom was reelected, but Karen Bass. All right, we still waiting to get some more of them numbers in. But on to a bit of good news though. In Florida, yes, some good news coming out of Florida. 25-year-old Florida Democrat secures Generation Z's first House seat. So the ones that come after, us millennials are getting old now, and the generation that come after us, they finally got them their first politician. Maxwell Alejandro Frost focused on issues important to many young voters: gun violence, climate change, abortion rights, and Medicare for all. And so this is a good sign. This is a good sign for something like this to happen in Florida. Now, this is definitely community based, and with gerrymandering and all of that, we get stories like this, but primarily because a certain group of people who look a particular way have all been grouped into a particular community. So, for those that don't know or may not be aware, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is when congressional lines, district lines, are cut up in a way to where it is strategically manipulating who's in that district and who isn't. And routinely, gerrymandering is used to break up large black communities or just to create solely black districts, right? To either isolate black power for a particular group in a particular area, or for them to say, like, to kind of spread out the black vote or the minority vote across different areas. So with things like gerrymandering, it does put us in a position where when we get stories like this, we get people that are beneficial. We get minorities occupying these particular positions. I apologize to anybody who don't like that term. It is people that's like that. But he is in Florida's 10th congressional district. He got a win over Calvin Wimbish, and he was taking over the spot that Representative Val Demings was actually trying to occupied, but she was trying to beat Marco Rubio. So Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who is a self-proclaimed black man, a self-proclaimed Afro-Latino man, individual. And I mean, again, stands for things like gun violence, climate change, abortion rights. Those are the things that we want to hear. But at the same time, like what bothers me when we say this is what they focused on, what many young vote. No, this is what people in those communities care about. Young voters ain't the only people who care about gun violence. Young voters are the only. I ain't gonna lie. We are the only ones who give a fuck about climate change. Right, I'll give us that. Right, that Democrats, they got, if they need somebody that's gonna push that climate change agenda, we do give a fuck about that. But gun violence is something that are like that our communities always have been important and mattered. But I think things like abortion rights and Medicare for all, abortion rights has surprised me because in a lot of places it's much more of a lot more people believe that it's a right than we think. The problem with watching things on cable news is that we get the extremes. We don't really get to see like that middle curve, that bell curve, where it's like most people are like pretty reasonable when it comes to it. And I think what stood out the most to me was Kansas. when they had their referendum, when they had their vote on abortion, and the state of Kansas voted to keep abortions legal. It's like, yo, ain't nobody else got no excuse. Ain't nobody else got no excuse. I know, like in Missouri, which is the state right next to it, actually triggered it was had a trigger law where I think it was like after 15 days they banned it, that type of stuff. So it's good to have a state like Kansas next to a state like Missouri where you have those types of bans. A state like Oklahoma, we have those type of bans where it's possible for those things to still be available. But Kansas really came through. Kansas really came through. But this is a good news. Again, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, Gen Z's first House seat. Again, Congress is too damn old. It's the oldest that it's ever been. So seeing something like this is definitely beneficial. Where else we at? Those are some of the things that I just had written down. I like I said, I had to get that off just primarily because I will not be here. I won't be able to do the show Thursday. As we check back into Georgia with 96% in, it looked like Raphael Warnock is going to pull it out. Still a lot of votes left out there, but Raphael Warnock actually came back. So we're getting a lot of votes from DeKalb County, in Georgia. So that means that those heavily black metropolitan areas are coming through for Raphael Warnock, which again, if he can't get over that 50% threshold, it will turn into a runoff with just him and Herschel Walker, because right now you do have the Libertarian candidate here pulling in 2% of the vote right here. Chase Oliver pulling in 2% of the vote. I ain't really know. Well, I guess it's a little over 1,000 write-in candidates. So, but yeah, Georgia's definitely looking like it's getting to a runoff. So, with that being said, y'all, I just definitely want to get that off. Shout out to Stacey Abrams again. That's somebody that, like, regardless of whether or not she, occupying the position that she's in, we need to put her in a position of power when it comes to the black community and how we view things politically. Like, we've done things like put people like Jesse Jackson, and we've had people like what's the perm? Y'all know who I'm talking about. Reverend Al Sharpton. We've had these individuals allow us to now reintroduce and then let's give them that same respect. If we could spend all this time talking about Kanye, if we can spend all this time talking about Kyrie, let's look at the people who are actually within the halls of power pushing back against the nonsense that's going on up there. Y'all see the type of people that they're trying to tell us should be in control of our government, right? Stacey Abrams is somebody that, regardless of whether or not she's the actual governor of Georgia, nationally, us as black people need to be doing what we can to go based off of her model. Again, before we say we should follow Georgia, we definitely need to see how this Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker should take place. Because if Herschel Walker somehow win this runoff, we throwing Georgia out. We getting rid of them. And we don't care that they got one Democrat, one Republican. Like, again, if that state is willing to put somebody like Herschel Walker in the position of power like that, well, we gotta get back to the drawing board. And so with that being said, man, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night. I got a flight tomorrow, still gotta pack and all these other things. I thank y'all for joining me for this late night session. We're gonna end the show the way that we bring it in.
In the city, we gon' slide, bet I be there pronto. Me, my guys, we really live. Lord forgive me, pay my tithes. Please don't have me reach inside, and that's in the console. Keep the semi when I ride. Lit off